So, you want to be a real English teacher in Japan. With real teacher, I mean not as an ALT, because though T in ALT means teacher, the A, which stands for assistant, tells more about the job description of an ALT. But for real teacher, I mean you are the main teacher or the only teacher doing the job. From lesson planning, classroom management, grading students or doing the assessments, doing homeroom duties, among many others. So, if you really want to be an English teacher in Japan, keep on watching because I have 5 important tips for you. First up, check the job description of the posting. So many of the job postings require a native English speaker or a native level English speaker. But make sure that what you are applying for is a real teacher position and not as an ALT position. Because, for example, there are some job postings that say they are in need of native English teachers. But if you read through the job descriptions, they're actually looking for assistant language teachers. Second, you have to check if the company or the school is open to hiring applicants who are not in Japan or for applicants outside of Japan. Because for most job postings, they want the applicants to be already here in Japan, maybe for easier processes like interviews or demo teachings and processing of the necessary documents. The third one, you need to learn Japanese. Because again, as I've mentioned earlier, for real teaching positions, for real English teaching positions, you will be working by yourself. You will be teaching by yourself in the classroom. So you need to be able to understand and to explain better the lesson, even if you are teaching English. Though ideally, you're not supposed to be speaking in Japanese so that the students or the learners will be able to get exposed to the sounds, the real sounds of English language. However, in the name of more effective teaching and learning process, you need to explain further what the students don't understand in a language that they could understand more easily. And that is through Japanese language. Unless you are applying or you are going to work in an international school, Japanese language skill is really a big factor for you to be able to land into an English teaching position here in Japan. And based on experience, some schools conduct an interview or some companies conduct interviews in Japanese. Though most parts of the interviews are in English, there's also a part or a portion wherein the Japanese interviewers will be asking you several questions and will be making you explain certain topics that they will be opening up. So I remember when I applied for a native English teaching position in one prefectural BOE, part of the application process or the screening process is an interview in Japanese, and then there's also like a roundtable discussion in Japanese with the other applicants. So again, take note, they are looking for a native English teacher, but they are conducting the screening process in Japanese. Though there's also an interview part in English, but again, the second stage, so because the first stage is the document screening. The second stage requires the applicants to have a good command of the Japanese language. But there was also one private school where I applied that they had the interview part in Japanese. Before going to the interview, I was thinking, okay, I'll try to answer in Japanese with my little Japanese skills. So and then when I was in there and they began asking me questions in Japanese, I panicked. So I answered in English, and as expected, I wasn't called for the final interview. But again, most schools or most companies require you to have a good command of the Japanese language, at least level 3, N3 level of the JLPT. And then the fourth one, this is very common when you are applying for a job position in Japan, especially for teaching positions. I just don't know with the other positions or jobs, but many of the schools that I applied to required a recommendation letter or a letter of reference. Some of those schools or some of those companies were asking for only one letter of reference, but some of them asks for 2 or 3 recommendation letters or letters of reference. Though there were also some companies or some schools that asked for just names and contact information or email addresses of your referees. So, but most of them were asking for the physical copy of the letter of reference. So, just like when you're applying for a jet position, diba, one of the requirements is a reference letter. So you can also ask your superiors or former bosses or professors to give you a letter of reference when you are applying for a real English teaching position here in Japan. Again, for the letter of reference, they should be able to vouch your work ethics, your qualifications, your skills, and then what other things you could contribute to the school or to the organization you're applying to. So you have to carefully choose also those who you would be asking to give you a letter of reference or a recommendation letter. And then the fifth one is you have to beef up your credentials. So unlike in ALT positions that accept graduates of any bachelor's degree or any 4-year course, for a real English teaching position in Japan, they are more specific that they want you to be a graduate of education or linguistics or language teaching. So it's not enough that you have a diploma or a degree. They are more specific with education degrees or linguistic or teaching degrees because again, this is a real teaching position. Aside from an education or teaching degree, you need to have experience teaching at elementary school, junior high school, senior high school, or university depending on the school or the company that you're applying to. So again, this is a real English teaching position. So unlike in the JET program or any other ALT dispatch companies, for schools, they'll be asking you for about 2 years. For schools, of course, they want you to be already knowledgeable of how real classroom teaching is. And then it's not enough that you have your bachelor's degree for, more chances of getting hired. You need to have your master's or your doctorate degrees, preferably in education or in language teaching or in languages. So I have applied to tens of schools or companies already in Japan, and most of them require a graduate of a master's degree in education or a master's degree in TESOL or English language teaching. That's at least for high school, junior high school levels. But if you want to work at a university, you need to have, of course, master's degree, but the more papers you send, the more entries you send, the more chances of getting hired, the more chances of winning. You need to have a doctorate degree also in education or in language teaching or in languages. Not only that, a teaching certificate is also a big factor for getting hired or getting considered for a teaching job position. So it doesn't matter if it's teaching license in your home country or it can be an IB certificate if you want to apply to an international school. So I know getting an IB certificate is quite expensive, but I believe it's all worth it for a better chance of getting hired to an international school. For university teaching positions, you need to have at least 3 or some of them specify that you need to list at least 3 papers or studies that were published. And then for also projects that you initiated in your previous experiences. So papers or studies, which means previous researches or previous research papers or studies that you have published, maybe online or printed and physical publications. So there you go. Those are my 5 tips if you want to be a real English teacher in Japan and not as an ALT. So I hope you learned something from this. Good luck to your future teaching career in Japan. I'll see you again next time.